In this presentation, we discuss how Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels explain how crime manifests from conflict within a capitalist society, how their theory is relevant to today, and we also discuss the conflict and radical approach to the causes of crime. The distinction between conflict and radical theories is that conflict theorists are most concerned with minimizing the inequalities of the existing structure. Radical theorists are concerned with replacing class inequalities of capitalism with a decentralized socialist society. Conflict and radical theories are each macro-level theories, which is researchers that look at large-scale social processes like social stability and change. These theories assume that societal forces shape the nature of social institutions, and within these channel the behavior of humans and their interactions. These theories share the view of society's divisions and inequality as the cause and an indicator of crime, the type and level of crime. They view humans as potentially active, creative beings who can shape their social world, while recognizing that the world in the form of hierarchical power structures shape them. These theories are influenced by Marxist ideals and thoughts. Marxism suggested that capitalism would inevitably produce internal tensions leading to its own destruction. Marx says, as industry becomes more mechanized, using more constant capital and less variable capital, the rate of profit ought to fall. For as a proportion, less capital will be advanced on labor, and only labor can create value. Karl Marx ushered in radical change, advocating proletarian revolution and freedom from the ruling classes. Karl Marx was motivated by the idea that individual freedom as the highest good and basing politics on science principles rather than appeals to custom, natural law, religion, or tradition. The following slide is a quote from the German ideology where Marx began to develop his theory of history. It helps define what he means by individual freedom.
In continuation from the previous slide, a quote from German ideology. The division of labor offers us the first example. As long as man remains in natural society, that is, as long as the cleavage exists between the particular and the common interest, as long, therefore, as activity is not voluntary, not naturally divided, man's own deed becomes an alien power opposed to him, which enslaves him instead of being controlled by him. For as soon as the division of labor comes into being, each man has a particular exclusive sphere of activity which is forced upon him, and which he cannot escape. He is a hunter, a fisherman, a shepherd, or a critical critic, and he must remain so if he does not want to lose his means of livelihood. While in a communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow. To hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, and criticize after dinner, just as I have in mind without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, shepherd, or critic. In this slide, I'll be talking about how, based on these theories of crime, they're more likely to emerge from conflict between different segments of society. So when we're talking about the wealthy class versus the lower class, being fueled by a system of domination based on inequality, alienation, and injustice. They would also emerge from differences in power, and the struggle for control can bring about crime, and it can be manifested in several ways. One way would be how, when dominant groups define the behavior of the inferior as threatening their interests, so when dominant groups use law as a weapon to criminalize others' behavior, and use the criminal justice system to enforce their own groups of definition of the reality of what is unacceptable for the purpose of preserving their dominant position in society. An example of this would be how, when a rich politician makes a law that benefits their own interest, and that ultimately only hurts the lower class. It makes it very hard for the lower class to get by without violating or simply not conforming to the law that the rich politician makes, which then would have the criminal justice system take matters into their own hands and just punish the lower class even more, all while never affecting the wealthy. And another example would be how when dominant groups of society directly abuse the lesser group, working class. So when corporations pollute the environment, violate health and safety regulations, and how we see nowadays that our planet is being affected significantly by pollution, especially corporate pollution. And you don't really see the rich CEOs changing up their agendas to help our planet simply because it isn't in their best interest to lose profit for the sake of the world. They want the people to keep buying their products every single day to keep them richer at the expense of the people and the environment. It's a form of resistance by subordinate segments of society, both to their own domination and perceived economic and social injustices. So to wrap this up, so when society promotes individual and egotistic interest at the expense of social, collective, altruistic, or humanistic interests. How does capitalism create crime? Capitalism is criminogenic because it encourages self-interest before public duty. It encourages materialistic consumers, making us desire an unrealistic and often unattainable lifestyle. Capitalist advertising can lead to crime because it creates desire for their products, even though we don't need or can really even afford these things. To go along with that, we see advertisements every single day that promote the newest, most improved, better than the last type of products that make us feel more and more pressure to keep up with that materialistic lifestyle. And because of this, since some people really want to attain it, but not being able to afford it, it leads to crime. In its wake, it generates inequality and poverty, which means that the rich can afford and keep paying for more new services, more products, more resources, all while the poor are starving and can barely even get by with their basic necessities, creating an even bigger gap of inequality. Neighborhoods in poverty have higher crime rates. Poverty can result in crime because it's the only way that the powerless can survive. We see that people work 40 to 60 hours a week, and some even take on multiple jobs, and despite their overworked sacrifice, it still isn't enough. And because of this, it leads to making the decision to pursue crime to help them survive and get them what they want and need. And the effects of this could lead to self-medication, drugs or alcohol, which then can lead to more crime because of the lack of money resources to obtain those drugs and alcohol. Alienation can lead to crime like violence because of the frustration of not being in control of your own life. All classes commit crime: white-collar crime, corporate crime, which could consist of tax evasion, embezzlement, bribery, money laundering. The list goes on and on. The elite make the law in their own interest. This was spoken about in the previous slide. The ideological functions of selective law enforcement. Research on Marxist theory focuses on how the justice system was designed and how it operates to further class interests.
This is a kind of helpful chart that shows where Marxist theories of crime branches out into other subtopics like the basics and all classes commit crime and criticisms and positive evaluations. And it shows where each topic goes into other subtopics and expounds on them more. So to answer the question, how is their theory relevant today? We can look at today's society where we do have a very abundant class issue. And this is very apparent on the news, watching politicians speak and current issues that we are facing in America. And there are politicians like Bernie Sanders and AOC who want to replace the current capitalistic society with a more radical approach. And this is also what Marx and Engels believed, and that they assume that class conflict is based on the inequality of wealth. And so in the reading that we read for chapter 4 by Raymond and Leighton, they discuss the cycle of how the rich stay in power and the poor stay contained in the prison system. And this is a common issue in today's society. So those that are at poverty level are much more frequently targeted to be arrested for crime-like acts, while those in power and with money have ways of getting out of trouble, and those with the power in the criminal justice system, they have no incentive to change because nothing is really harming them. So in a radicalistic ideal society, we would no longer have a class structure. And so by removing the divisions of upper class and lower class, there'd be no conflict. We would all be equal and on the same level. And these ideals are still trying to be met today and here in America. And you can see it in the news and by those politicians. So in conclusion, the ideas of Karl Marx are essential to socialism. Marx and Engels explain in their theory that the class structure of the capitalist mode of production is characterized by the conflict between two main classes, the bourgeoisie and the much larger proletariat. Marx's views considers the common laborer. Marx's criminology views the competitive nature of the capitalist system as a major cause of crime. The poor commit crimes because of their frustration, anger, and need, while the wealthy engage in illegal acts because they're used to the competition and because they must do so to keep their positions in society.